Last night, something happened in Tel Aviv that most major news networks spent less than 4 minutes covering. 4 minutes. For a city of 4 million people that spent the night running for their lives. I want you to think about that for a second. You are inside your apartment. It is past midnight. Suddenly, the air raid siren tears through the walls. You have less than 90 seconds. 90 seconds to grab your children, your elderly parents, anyone who cannot move fast, and get to a shelter. Except the siren never went off in your neighborhood. The system failed. And the only warning you got was the sound of the first explosion 2 blocks away. That is not a hypothetical. That is what happened to real families in real neighborhoods across central Israel on the night of March 25th. And that is why I am sitting here right now. Because if you are only getting your information from the headline scroll, you are missing the actual story. Not the political story, not the diplomatic back and forth, the physical, boots on the ground, what is actually happening to human beings story. And that story is far more serious and far more consequential for the entire world than almost anyone is telling you. So let me tell you what is actually happening. And I promise you, by the time we get to the part about Russia, about the Strait of Hormuz, about what is sitting stranded in those shipping lanes right now, and about what that means for the price of everything you buy, you will understand why this conflict stopped being a regional war weeks ago and became something that reaches into every country on earth, including yours. But first, let us talk about what Iran did last night and why it represents a fundamental shift in how this war is being fought. Iran launched what military analysts are now calling Operation True Promise 4. In a single day, March 25th, Iran executed 9 separate attack waves against Israel. Not 1 wave, not 2, 9. 4 of those waves targeted the Greater Tel Aviv area alone, where 4 million people live. 4 hit southern Israel, 1 struck the north, and these were not random launches fired in the hope that something gets through. These were coordinated, precisely sequenced attacks designed around a very specific tactical problem. How do you overwhelm a defense system that the entire world considers nearly impenetrable? Israel's Iron Dome has become almost mythological in public perception. You have probably heard officials quote the interception rate, 92%. And on paper, 92% sounds extraordinary. If you are a student taking an exam, 92 is an A-. But this is not an exam. This is ballistic missiles over one of the most densely populated strips of land on the planet. And that remaining 8% across more than 440 ballistic missiles fired since this began means roughly 35 warheads have reached their targets inside Israel. 35 direct hits. That is not a statistic you round down. That is a national emergency that has been dressed up in a reassuring number. And Iran knows exactly how to make that 8% grow. Because here is what changed, and this is the part that the competitor channels are dancing around without fully explaining. Nearly half the missiles Iran has fired in this campaign carry cluster munitions, and cluster munitions do not behave like conventional warheads. A conventional warhead follows a single trajectory from launch to impact. Every layer of Israel's defense architecture, Iron Dome for short range, David's Sling for medium range, Arrow for ballistic missiles, was engineered around one fundamental assumption. One incoming object, one interception problem. You track it, you calculate the trajectory, you fire an interceptor, and you destroy it. A cluster warhead operates on a completely different physics. At somewhere between 7 and 10 kilometers altitude, the warhead splits. And when it splits, it does not become 2 targets. It becomes approximately 24 separate submunitions, each one falling on its own independent arc, each one carrying lethal explosive force, and each one now representing an individual targeting problem for a defense system that was never designed to solve 24 problems simultaneously from a single launch. Israeli Brigadier General Ran Kochav, speaking in reserve, admitted publicly that Israel can intercept some fragments. His exact word was limited. That admission from a senior military official is staggering when you understand what it means operationally. It means that every time Iran fires one of these cluster warhead missiles and it gets through the outer defense layers, whatever hits the ground is largely beyond Israel's ability to stop. And Iran tested this capability in June 2025 during what analysts called the 12-day war. That was the proof of concept phase. What we are watching now in March 2026 is the full operational deployment of a weapon system specifically engineered to defeat Israeli air defense. On March 22nd, 2 Iranian ballistic missiles struck the cities of Arad and Dimona after air defenses failed to intercept them. Reuters reported 31 people hospitalized in Arad alone, including 18 children, with at least 9 of them in serious condition. The Associated Press reported more than 150 people treated overall from just those 2 strikes. It was one of the worst mass casualty events of this entire war. And the shelter situation inside Israeli cities is making the casualty picture even worse. Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Hulai confirmed after a March 24th strike that a missile punched directly into an apartment block, 4 people injured, 3 buildings heavily damaged, and the main structure may need to be demolished entirely. A municipal representative told the Knesset committee that 11% of Tel Aviv residents cannot reach a sheltered space within a reasonable time when a siren sounds. In a city of nearly 500,000 people, 1 in 10 has nowhere safe to go. The shelters that do exist in South Tel Aviv are being described by residents as overcrowded, vandalized, and unsanitary, with violence breaking out inside some of them during raids. And in some neighborhoods, sirens are giving less than 90 seconds of warning before impact. For elderly residents, for families with infants, for anyone with mobility limitations, 90 seconds is not enough time to cross a room. On March 18th, Iran fired cluster warheads at central Israel. 2 people were killed in Ramat Gan, a couple in their 70s. They had a safe room in their own home. They just could not reach it in time. The warhead detonated before they could cross the distance between where they were standing and the door that would have saved them. And the costs of all of this go beyond the human toll, though the human toll alone should be enough to demand serious attention. There is a financial dimension to this war that is accelerating Israel toward an unsustainable position. A David Sling interceptor costs approximately $320,000. The Arrow 3, the system designed to handle exoatmospheric interception and destroy missiles above the atmosphere before they split, costs around $650,000 per interceptor. An Iranian ballistic missile costs between $200,000 and $500,000 to produce. Israel is spending more money to defend each engagement than Iran spends to attack, every single exchange. And that arithmetic does not improve over time. It compounds. It gets worse with every wave, with every stockpile drawdown, with every decision to deploy a cheaper system against a threat that cheaper system was never built to handle. One Israeli security official told the financial outlet Calculus that the real solution is the Arrow 3 because it destroys missiles outside the atmosphere before they can split into submunitions. But the official was blunt about the gap between what is needed and what is currently deployed. Expanding David's Sling into a role it was never built for does not change the physics. The same official described the current reality as all of Israel being full of shrapnel impact scenes that are barely being counted. Now I want to talk about something that has received almost no attention in Western coverage, and it directly explains why Iran's capabilities have been accelerating rather than degrading since this war began. Russia. Western intelligence, published through the Financial Times on March 25th, confirmed that Russia has been delivering drones to Iran since early March. These are Giran 2 drones, Russian-manufactured upgrades of the original Iranian Shahed 136 design. Nearly 90% of all Shahed assembly now takes place inside Russia, on a production line Moscow built using Iranian technology during the Ukraine war. The pipeline has reversed. Iran exported the design. Russia industrialized it, upgraded it, and is now shipping the improved version back. What Iran wants from those Russian variants is not numbers. Analyst Antonio Gustazzi told the Financial Times directly that Iran does not need more drones. It needs better drones. Specifically, the improved engines, upgraded navigation systems, and anti-jamming capabilities that Russian engineers incorporated into the Giran variants. Scholar Nicole Graevsky added that those Russian versions already exceed domestic Iranian production quality, and Iran will almost certainly reverse engineer the improvements into its own manufacturing lines. Ukraine has stated that Russia is providing Iran with intelligence support. A Wall Street Journal report cited by Reuters added that Moscow has shared satellite imagery and improved drone technology with Tehran, though Reuters noted it could not independently verify that claim. Israel recognized the supply corridor and struck Iran's Caspian seaport of Bandar Anzali, which U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth identified as the primary channel for Russian weapons flowing into Iran. The strike was a direct acknowledgement that this is no longer a bilateral conflict between Iran and Israel. It never really was. But the external architecture supporting Iran's military capacity is now visible and confirmed. Let me tell you about the economic blast radius of this war, because this is the dimension that reaches every single person watching this video regardless of where you live. The Strait of Hormuz carries approximately 20% of global oil supply and a fifth of the world's liquefied natural gas. That waterway has been functionally closed since early March. Before this war, roughly 130 commercial ships transited those waters every day. That number collapsed to fewer than 6. 2,000 vessels and 20,000 seafarers are sitting stranded. 2,000 ships, 20,000 people. Brent crude opened this conflict around $73 per barrel. It peaked at $126. Even after President Trump announced a temporary pause on strikes against Iranian energy sites, extended today by 10 days to April 6th, Brent crude is still trading around $95 per barrel, sharply above pre-war levels and showing no signs of returning to baseline. The International Energy Agency called this the greatest global energy security challenge in recorded history. IEA member nations released a record 400 million barrels from strategic reserves on March 11th, the single largest coordinated strategic reserve release ever conducted. Goldman Sachs projected Brent averaging around $110 through March and April, and warned that in a severe disruption scenario, prices could move significantly higher. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the UAE collectively lost at least 10 million barrels per day of production by March 12th. That is the largest supply disruption in the recorded history of global oil markets. Not since the 1970s, not since the Gulf War, the largest ever, and the damage extends well beyond crude oil. Qatar Energy declared force majeure on long-term liquefied natural gas contracts. 45% of global sulfur production comes from the Gulf, and that supply line is severed, which is driving fertilizer costs upward worldwide. The UN World Food Program warned that 70% of food imports to Gulf states have been cut off. U.S. gasoline prices are approaching $4 per gallon nationally, with California above $5. The OECD is forecasting U.S. inflation at 4.2% for this year. Nations that had nothing to do with starting this war are being pulled in. The UAE has faced, since February 28th alone, 357 ballistic missiles, 15 cruise missiles, and more than 1,800 drones. Today, 2 people were killed in Abu Dhabi when debris from a successfully intercepted missile fell on Suhan Road. A Pakistani national and an Indian national, citizens of countries that are not combatants in this conflict, killed by the falling wreckage of a war they had no part in starting. The UAE's total death toll stands at 11, with 169 injured from more than 30 nationalities. Iran struck fuel storage at Kuwait International Airport today. Kuwait's Interior Ministry simultaneously announced it had uncovered a Hezbollah-directed terrorist network planning assassinations of Kuwaiti leaders. 6 suspects arrested. 14 others fled the country. Saudi air defenses are intercepting dozens of drones daily over the eastern province, directly above Ras Tanura, Gawar, and Abqaiq, the most critical concentration of oil infrastructure on the planet. Qatar's capital has heard explosions overhead as defense systems engage incoming fire. None of these nations chose this fight. Every single one of them is now in it. And through all of this, diplomacy is a fog. Trump says talks are progressing. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi says no negotiations have happened and none are planned. Pakistan says it is facilitating indirect exchanges around a 15-point American proposal. Israel says it is not party to any talks and will keep striking until Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities are eliminated. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Ayal Zamir told the cabinet that the military could collapse under the simultaneous weight of operations across Iran, Lebanon, the West Bank, and the home front. That is not an anonymous leak. That is the most senior military officer in Israel telling his own government that the current operational tempo is unsustainable. Israel announced today the killing of Alireza Tangsiri, commander of the IRGC Navy, along with the head of the Navy's intelligence branch in strikes on Bandar Abbas. Iran has confirmed none of it. The question is no longer whether this war is expanding. That question was settled weeks ago. The question now is what happens to every nation caught inside the blast radius when the pressure blows over the top, because the answer to that question is no longer limited to the Middle East. It is in your fuel prices, your grocery bills, your inflation numbers, and the shipping lanes that carry the goods your country depends on. This war has already crossed every border. Most people just have not been told yet.